So this is question 7. Looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you have learnt in the progression from it to the full product? So looking at this, I can see lack of technical skill and lack of practical skill. I think when making this, I was a beginner at Photoshop, and it took me a while to grasp the skills required to make a good quality publication. I wasn't knowledgeable on what made a good looking magazine. I wasn't knowledgeable on what should be on a magazine and how to place it so it looks visually stimulating. So I'd like to start with the masthead. I think the proximity between the letters are far too far apart. This is visually intrusive and it just doesn't look nice with such white space between the letters. It looks boring, it looks bland, and I think this would affect sales of the magazine. Secondly, there is no set colour scheme. It's just a mash of colours which kind of don't really go together. They don't go with the image. I haven't picked a colour to match with anything. It's just not organised. There's no continuity, and I think when making a magazine, it's extremely important to have continuity in order for it to look pleasurable. There are little things like how this image is overlapping with the main image, and you can't really read this properly, and it's just not professional. There's no background to this, so it's just a white background with a load of writing on the top. This is really bland again, and I don't think it's really very exciting for any student to buy. Some of the positives is that the layout is quite minimalist, and this did eventually reflect in my main task, which I'll talk about in a second. But I think the organisation of the magazine looks good, and the main image is clear. I realised that taking images in the pop-up studio is a lot better than taking them at home or at school without the lighting and all the technologies which are given in school in the studio. When I started to make my final task, I took into recognition all the things that I wanted to do differently from my preliminary task. I started off by knowing that I wanted to use a variation of fonts. So you can see here that I've used Bevas for the main font, for the headlines and the taglines, and I've used quite a striking font to re-enhance my genre of punk rock. And I've used a more eloquent, subdued font here, explaining some of what's inside. I thought this contributed to the overall look I wanted my magazine to have. I had this clear in my mind from looking at inspirations from my similar text analysis. I thought these fonts were all in stark contrast to each other, but perhaps they looked quite good together. I've used a clear colour scheme. I've colour picked the colours from the lips and put it on the masthead, and then kind of faded that down to the headlines and taglines. I've used more technologies from Photoshop, like a gradient on the 50 and a very subtle gradient on the masthead. It's very unobvious, but I've used the cloning tool to make my model's hair look like it is covering the whole of the back of the whole of the background of the publication, when in fact it was only up to about 3/4 of the way up. I had inspiration from a magazine that I analysed in my STAs, and I thought this also really enhanced my genre. From my preliminary task, I feel like the layout is quite similar. I was quite happy with the layout here. It's still quite minimal, but I feel it's more organised and it looks a lot better than the first go that I had on Photoshop. So I feel like the preliminary task was a very positive thing to do before we started our main task, in order to gain more knowledge on what creates a effective and stylish magazine.